people personify these robots like they're humans, and they're not, right? They're very fast computational machines. They're bricks, right? They don't actually. I don't think they think. I believe that the goal of this technology is to give people more room to spend what they really want to spend their time on. And we're going to be spending the next 5 or 10 years figuring out how this is really going to change for society and make sure that it's hopefully serving our needs rather than just the needs of the big tech companies or government. There are going to be things that, I don't know, are irreducibly human. And a lot of that has to do with, what feeds our souls as opposed to
Yes.
what bakes our bread or harvests our grain. 80% is good, 20% is not so good. Some of it's really horrible. And I like to think that we're going to tame the genie and actually get the lives that our kids and grandkids want.
Today I'm talking to Jim Fruchterman, the author of the book Technology for Good. Jim has 4 decades, and there we go, is the book. He has 4 decades at the forefront of AI, got to start launching rockets that apparently half didn't make it off the launch pad and the other half exploded in a huge fireball, which I wish I could have been there for that. He's the founder of Calera, an early optical character recognizer that could read any font. Then he went on to build Benetech and Bookshare, building reading machines for the blind and early generations of pattern recognition. He's a self-described entrepreneur, problem solver, and tech optimist who loves using technology to solve real problems. So welcome, Jim.
Thanks a lot, Evan. Glad to talk about tech for good with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation. So, how is AI going to help people? And how are we going to use it for good?
I think AI is like any technology. This is just a bigger than average leap, right? It gets rid of drudgery. And so when I think about things that people don't like to do or can't do, and AI can solve that, let's jump on that. And disability was where we got started. It's such a great example of AI making people who can't read themselves be able to pick any book they want and scan it and read it. That was our breakthrough, and that just made a gigantic difference for the independence of blind people, their ability to go to school, get a job, keep a job, whatever it might be. And nowadays we're doing a lot around productivity, right? If I can take the 40% of your job that's the crappiest and let you do more of the stuff that you're actually good at, that's more human based, then I think we've done something that has used AI for good.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of the conversation right now is around either, making more cat pictures or kind of not very good songs, or it's around the dangers, And of
Mhm.
course, everybody's all excited about ChatGPT and Claude and, using it to write and research and so forth. But I think you're really interested in how AI can practically make our lives better. What are some of the ways that it's doing it right now, and what do you see coming over the horizon?
So I could reel off a bunch from the
Yeah.
book, right? I mean, you've got talking points that helps parents who are immigrants who don't speak English communicate with their kids' teacher.
Mm.
Turns out that if the parents are in touch with the teacher, kids show up at school more and they have better outcomes. So, and that's the holy grail of ed tech. Well, instead of doing a better, I don't know, math teaching software app, instead have the parents be able to talk to the teacher by using AI to do the translation and adjust to the call. That's a great example. Digital Green is using technology to advise farmers on the ground in India and in Africa. You ask a question in your own vernacular local language, not English, and it will show you a video of someone answering your question in your local language and demonstrating the particular technique that you might like. There are Swahili chatbots that actually speak, Swahili with people to give them health advice. Mom Connect in South Africa helping expectant mothers get their questions answered. Now, at least half the questions are answered by a chatbot with the correct answer because it's been a vetted answer. And then the humans are working on the woman who has a more challenging set of questions, maybe a woman who needs to go into a clinic. You want that call, that text being handled by a human.
Mm. Yeah, you're making me think that, thousands of years ago, if you didn't know how to do something, you'd have to go and either use trial and error or hope that someone in your family or tribe figured it out and then had shown you. And then we've got writing, but then you've got to have that right book and you have to be literate. And then we've got libraries, but then you've got to go to the library. And then we've got Google, but you still have to kind of search and then go read a bunch of things. And then now you've got, okay, I can ask my whole question in any language and I can actually get a customized answer. And I guess that is a pretty big step forward, huh?
Yeah, and I'd say most of the exciting applications in tech for good of AI are some variation on what technically is called RAG, which is you take a standard chatbot and say, okay, before you just make up an answer, which could be wrong, I'm going to show you my domestic violence curriculum. I'm going to show you 1,000 questions and answers, and I want you to pretend to be the person who wrote those 1,000 vetted answers. And that puts up a bunch of guardrails, and you're much more likely to get a relevant answer because you're drawing on the accumulated wisdom of the people in this area as opposed to the general chatbots, which is kind of like, what does the average of the internet have to say about this? Which could be wrong.
Hmm. So, in other words, we need to go beyond just the general intelligence now, and we need to come back and we need to create a bunch of specialized intelligences.
Yeah, because you have something that's really great at language, thing really great at conversation, but doesn't know a lot about your specialty. So much of the applications in both business and tech for good are domain specific knowledge. Do you know all about medicine? Do you know all about domestic violence? Do you know all about job coaching? These are all examples of products that are actually out there now and seem to be doing a fair amount of good, as opposed to the general purpose ones, which may not be fit for your particular need. And right now, you don't want to be using a general purpose chatbot for mental health counseling. It's too sycophantic. I want to jump off a building. Oh, that would be wrong. Well, I'm doing research on jumping off a building. Oh, then let me explain to you how you would do that. You don't want that. You want something that actually knows about we're doing mental health. Let's make sure never to encourage someone to harm themselves, even if they say it's for research or whatever the hack is that people are using to get around the guardrails.
I'm always curious to understand the evolution of things and how they developed. And since you've been watching this and actually involved in it, could you maybe take us through a few of the generations of what is called AI and like
Mhm.
what it could do and not do, and then maybe what the paradigm shift and then what it could do, maybe through three or four of those levels?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's fun. I mean, when I started more than 40 years ago, the leading edge of AI, which we then called machine learning, was visual pattern recognition. Can we take a bunch of characters and read or enter that data so someone doesn't have to type it in? And that had a lot of commercial applications and also helped people with disabilities. We then got into things like voice recognition, right? And voice synthesis. These were things that depended on AI getting better and better with language, not just letters, but the actual words and knowing that these words go together, that this question means this semantically, right? And so we started like moving up this sort of channel of being able to do these different things. We got into translation, so we had gigantic databases of here's the English, here's the Spanish of the same thing. Okay, AI is going to now learn how to translate between English and Spanish. And of course, these things didn't suddenly like one, one year we went from 0 to 100%, in the capability, but you started to see these applications becoming more and more useful. And then I'd say, so you have all these visual pattern recognition, you did all this exciting linguistic kind of work, and then you had the transformer breakthrough, 7 or 8 years ago that has led to the current generation of Gen AI, where rather than just, is this X? Can you recognize that this is right? The traditional machine learning AI kind of application to being able to generate something. That's this major new kind of breakthrough. And frankly, everyone is trying to figure out what it's good for and what it's not good for. And the fact that only 80% of Gen AI projects are failing, that's pretty good news. 20% hit rate, that's a winner.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. Compared to we were joking around about like crypto projects before we got started, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was doing research for the book and I'm like, hey, 8 years ago, blockchain was going to completely remake the social sector and solve all societal problems. Can you show me one example of blockchain doing that in the nonprofit sector? And everyone's answer was, it's going to be great. And I'm like, yeah, but you've been saying that for 8 years,
Mm,
you know?
yeah, 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 yeah. So AI now is in from your perspective, it's automating a bunch of the drudgery so that it can kind of free us up to do the things that are more interesting or challenging or fun
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah.
Is it also going to automate those things though?
The fun things?
Yeah.
I don't know. I never got the vibe that, an AI tool had fun. It just, I just don't think, I mean, people personify these robots like they're humans and they're not, right? They're very fast computational machines. They're bricks, right? They don't actually, I don't think they think, I don't think they have empathy. But man, in a certain task, they can look like they think and be indistinguishable from someone who thinks. But that tends to be the stuff that doesn't require a lot of judgment or a lot of human sort of nature. And I am an optimist about this. I think
Mhm.
that we're going to figure out as a society what it's good for, and we're going to stop it from doing things that are bad. I don't know. I think sex bots for kids are bad. I think we should probably make sure that companies aren't doing that, right? But I think there's so many other things. I mean, if, the analogies just go back with any big technology advance, right? No one is bemoaning the fact that people don't dig ditches with shovels and picks anymore, that we have backhoes that dig ditches, right? That's and no, I mean, when I started, there were typing pools and word processing pools where you had a room full of like 80, mainly women, who are actually doing these jobs. Those jobs don't exist. And I don't hear anyone complaining that they're gone. So I'm hoping that this is going to be a bigger than average, but still normal technology evolution. We're going to be spending the next 5 or 10 years figuring out how this is really going to change for society and make sure that it's hopefully serving our needs rather than just the needs of the big tech companies or government.
I have to run a question by you.
Yeah.
Sometimes I teach about prompting and generative AI stuff, and
Yeah.
and I say one of the biggest problems is it's the genie problem. You find a genie coming out of a lamp, and it says, "I'll give you anything you want." And then in all the stories, there's always folly. Like one of my favorites is three men are shipwrecked on an island, and they're starving and they're almost dead. And then one of them finds a lamp and it rubs it, and a genie comes out and says, "I'll give you anything you want. You each get one wish." And one of them says, "I wish I was in Paris." And, the genie snaps his finger and the guy shows up at the Eiffel Tower. And the second one says, "I wish I was in New York." And, the genie snaps his fingers and he's at the Empire State Building. And then he says, "And now what do you wish?" And the guy starts looking around and he said, "I'm getting kind of lonely. I just wish I had my friends back, you know? So
Yeah, yeah, no, there's always that catch.
And so what I'm where I'm going with this, by the way, is that in kind of I've done a lot of work in the I don't know like self-help, personal development kind of success world, and if you give people the assignment, okay, to identify and specify what you want. What do you want most in life? Most people are not very good at giving specifications, right? They'll say, well,
Right.
like general success, or I want to be happy, or, whatever. I want, independence. Um, when it comes to generative AI, I've noticed that the better you are at specifying what you want,
Hmm.
the better you are at thinking and communicating clearly, the exponentially more kind of like high quality and just really like great results you're going to get out of it. So the question I have for you is, do we need to start teaching people a whole new reality where instead of being in scarcity and asking for general things, now we're in abundance and asking for specific things? And is that a thinking skill? Is it a social skill?
Evan, that is the core of AI forever, right? The people think, oh, it's a general purpose tool, it can do anything. And if you do that, it's terrible,
Mhm.
right? So I think that the secret to really effective use of AI, whether it was using character recognition or whether it's voice synthesis or voice recognition or any of these kinds of things, was the narrower you can make the field, the more specific, the higher it performs, right?
Mm.
As a general savant, it's not that good. It gets its facts wrong. It doesn't do math that great still, right? But if you actually narrow it down and say, I want to work on this one problem, I want you to really solve this one problem for me, the technology actually tends to come through. That's where the successful companies are. That's where the successful applications are. And yes, that is a skill that entrepreneurs need if they're going to make, their AI functionality actually work in their product. But it's also a larger skill in society, which is don't think this is going to answer all your questions. Zero in on where it's can really effectively solve a problem that is vexing you now. And if you can put enough boundaries on it, the chances are it might actually be able to do or help you with the problem you actually have. But yeah, make me happy. Not in its skill set right now.
Yeah, I recently heard that the the LLMs that we have right now, the kind of state of the art, are still not very good at playing chess, for example.
Hmm.
Right? So the original Deep Blue that beat Gary Kasparov almost 30 years ago could crush the current AI at chess,
Yeah.
right? And so this kind of goes to prove that these more specialist kind of AIs can be much better in a particular domain.
Yeah, and this is the current Gen AI sort of arms race is around knocking off each of these things that it does poorly. Now, is this actually going to pay off? But I mean, I will pick it bad at math problems. I mean, often you would say, what's 2 plus 2? And it might say 4, right? It might say 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, that's oversimplified. But now people have been saying, all right, we're going to have to make our general purpose LLMs better at math. So if you set a problem and say make it better, if they set their mind to making it better at chess, they would be able to do that. But commercially, is that really generalizable to a real world problem that they actually have? Probably not. So you want to keep chess playing as a specialty thing, or solving Go or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But the question about how to make Gen AI as helpful to society, you're really trying to narrow it into what are problems that people do. And I'm going to pick one that we're focusing on. We help people who do counseling and referral helplines. They're there for people in crisis. And, a lot of it is about empathy. And AI can fake empathy, but it doesn't actually have empathy. And sometimes it then goes and says something completely unempathetic, right? But if we can help them spend less time doing data entry, we're the heroes. And so a very simple AI thing you can do is have it do the summary of the conversation you just spent an hour in a text chat on, or even a voice chat, do the AI on turning the voice conversation into text, and then do a summary. That saves 8 or 10 minutes, 8 or 10 minutes of data entry, 8 or 10 minutes you can spend with a human if you're the human counselor. That's the kind of thing that I think we have to be thinking about, and we've narrowed it down to something that Gen AI is great at. Summarization is something it's great at. Great. We've because now it's not making stuff up. It's just like summarize, these 3,000 words or these 500 words. It's great at that. So a lot of it is getting better at picking the right problems. And as it gets better, it's like how to actually get it to perform inside that narrower box of a specific problem. And, if it doesn't work today, wait a year. It's probably going to work in a year.
How do you see us living in the future, right? If we go out, I don't know, let's say 5 or 10 years, and there's Tesla robots everywhere, and let's just say in a theoretical idealistic world, we no longer have to do any of the stuff that we don't want to do. What are humans actually doing during the day in their professional and personal lives?
Well, I think I believe that the goal of this technology is to give people more room to spend what they really want to spend their time on. And that could be building businesses. That could be doing art. That could be having a more just government. That could be figuring out how to get cheap energy. There's just a long list of human problems that, and remember, the generative AI is not that great at solving problems that it hasn't seen before.
Mhm.
And so that's where I think the magic of humanity is that creativity. And there's just an awful lot of cases where you don't want the average of a million writers being your author. That gives you a very high quality but bland product. But I think we're going to need to continue to have humans creating new content that will inspire the next generation of AI to follow in our footsteps. And I like to think that the magic of humanity is going to continue to be there, and that the AI is going to be sort of lagging our creativity and hopefully doing more and more of the boring stuff so we can spend more of our time actually, and there are people who have a vision of abundance in 2050, right? I mean, there was a recent book on the topic, right? Cheap energy, better health, better education, more economic development, right? There's just a whole bunch of things that could be possible in a world of abundance as long as we can forestall the dystopian sort of pictures of, you know, 10 oligarchs control everything, or the governments, keep everyone under their thumb. And, these battles go back and forth. And I like to think that we're going to tame the genie and actually get the lives that our kids and grandkids want. And who knows, maybe we'll still be around then with, a different set of technology happening.
So it's maybe we're all doing what our genius is, or our passion, or our kind of unique expression, and we have AI as this collaborator, this kind of creative assistant to kind of help us do it.
Yeah, and there's a debate in the sector, is AI a tool or is AI a worker? And depending on how you think of it, the world looks differently. I think of AI as a tool for humans to employ. I do not think of AI as a worker that just plugs in and replaces a human, because there's so many things that humans do that AI I think 10 years from now are still going to be bad at, right? But so much of the boring stuff, the productivity stuff could be possible, but if you just keep thinking of it as a tool that humans deploy, as opposed to the evil genie that's going to like be the next species that dominates.
Hmm.
I'm not as big a believer in that dystopian reality. The ones where humans go nuts, that's normal for humanity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I, after thinking about this for a while, where I got to was I'm trying to take the 80-20 balance. 80%, it's going to go really well and
Hmm.
things are going to be positive and optimistic. And then 20%, it could go bad and there could be dangers, like, a lot of futurists and so forth
Yeah.
tend to think. And then I try to spend my attention 80%, you know, visioning and thinking positive, and 20% looking at some of the negatives, trying to support some of the people that are, involved in X risk and so forth.
Yeah.
Because I we just don't know what's going to happen here, but this is a really interesting question. Is AI a tool or a worker?
Yeah.
And it seems like, I mean, if you listen to, for example, Elon Musk talking about, Optimus, and I heard an interview where he's talking
Mm.
about the human hand and what a kind of masterpiece that this thing is of architecture. And they have to have, I think, like 23 different actuators in it. And he's talking about the way the tendons work, and so forth. And I'm thinking to myself, he's trying to build a worker, like
Yeah.
in your
He definitely
language,
is.
and
Yeah.
it's Elon we're talking about here. So,
Yeah.
it's not like just, whatever. And he's not the only one. You see all these other robots. And so I mean, the optimist part of me says, yeah, this is going to be great. When the optimist is here, is it going to be, you kind of say, like, don't do my work for me, but do a lot of this stuff I don't want you to do? Or is it a collaborator? Or, he also was saying, I think this is several months ago, I saw him or someone else building robots saying that the real goal is for it to be able to watch a video, like maybe watch a video of someone driving a car, and then it can just go get in a car and drive it, right? That it can
Mhm.
learn that fast in terms of tasks. And so, how does this play out in your mind?
Yeah, and of course, I am not on the same page as Elon and some of the more extreme, because I don't think Elon fundamentally cares about people.
Mm,
Right? And so when your vision is you don't really care that much about people, or at least ordinary people, then the idea that, well, we're just going to replace them all with products and I'm going to make a lot of money off of that becomes sort of a normal way of looking at it. So I tend to
mhm.
think, and let's pick a real world example. People get old,
Yeah.
right? And when I made reading machines for the blind, my employment age blind users loved our reading machine, right? They could read far more, they could read what they wanted, they could read smut if they wanted and not have to apologize to someone who's reading it aloud to them, because they wouldn't do that. So it was an immense tool for empowerment. We had a much bigger abandonment problem with senior citizens. Why? Because it wasn't clear they actually wanted a tech tool. Matter of fact, I heard from one person who said, I'm returning my reading machine. It's because my daughter-in-law used to come over and read to me once a week. And that was like my one real human connection in a week. And now you replaced it with a machine.
Mm,
I didn't want the machine. I didn't want to read. I wanted
wow.
human contact. And
Yeah.
that's our challenge is, we have a robotic future where, well, we're going to take care of seniors with an army of robots. And a lot of seniors are going to say, I really need a human. We say, oh, we're going to have a chatbot that replaces a human. I'm not sure that's actually going to be what seniors actually want.
Yeah.
They might be glad to have someone who can lift them in and out of bed without having to pay through the nose for that. But Okay, that's a good application of robot, but there are going to be things that I don't know are irreducibly human, and a lot of that has to do with, what feeds our souls as opposed to
Yes.
what bakes our bread or harvests our grain, right?
Yeah, it's really important to use these, whether you call them tools or technologies
Mhm.
or assistants or whatever we think of them as, to help you get better at actually connecting with other people. Because so
Mhm.
much of what's happened over the last 25 years or something with, I call it anti-social media. It's like we've just gotten it's this camouflage, it's like a counterfeit version of actual relationship, but because it's firing off all the dopamine, and
Yep.
the getting us all, excited, it feels, while it's happening, maybe more exciting or something, but then in the long run, it's like bad Chinese food, you're just hungrier afterwards.
Yeah, and I know it's not filling as and but the thing is that because of the data that we have, because humans are biological beings with dopamine receptors,
Yeah.
we've now learned how to manipulate them. And our society is going to go through this sort of transition of saying, what are we okay with it doing? What are we not okay with it doing? And the Australian social media ban for under 16s is a statement that says we
Yes.
don't want you playing our 12-year-olds and 14-year-olds like they're pianos, right? and
Yes.
and yet they're very predictable, and you can do that, especially if your goal is to, I don't know, sell more subscriptions to what, or whatever product it is.
Yeah.
So this debate, and your 80-20 example is a really good one, right? 80% is good, 20% is not so good. Some of it's really horrible,
Yeah.
and you know our regulatory apparatus is slow. Okay, most people in the tech industry would say that's not bad, but I hope that when people start doing really bad stuff, like sex bots for kids or sexy chatbots for kids, that even if the government doesn't regulate, the societal revulsion is enough for you to back away from that. And so we're going to be using both soft and hard norms to control that 20%. You're never going to get rid of it entirely, but I like to think that the worst of the worst is going to be controlled. And society's actually been pretty decent about controlling existential threats, things that really could kill off all of humanity through more social norms. It's not okay to tinker with human genetics, at least not yet. Where as opposed to these things that are like, no, I'm making money, and maybe it has a negative external consequence, but I'm okay with it because I'm making money. That's the story of a lot of our big data companies is, you know, hey, we set out to do good. Some of these things are evil by accident. Oh my God, evil pays great. Let's double down on evil. And suddenly you find people where OpenAI is talking about doing sexy chatbots. This is not saving society. That was the original goal of OpenAI. What a come down.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was very disappointing when Google abandoned Don't Be Evil.
Yeah.
That's a real tragedy right there. Yeah.
Yeah, but they had to make money. I mean, they originally said that advertising with search engines was a terrible idea, but they had to back away from that. And I don't disagree that you have to follow the money,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I see, and I'm gonna pick a, there's a group of companies that took the 1% pledge. They pledged a percent of their equity, of their employee time, of their profits, of their products. Those companies tend to be really good social actors, even though they are very much focused on making money. But just having that side commitment to part
Yes.
of us is about doing social good with what we've created, our product. Those companies tend to be less out there in terms of being okay with things that I look at and go, ooh, aren't you embarrassed that you're actually talking about making money off of that?
How are you using generative AI these days? Like in a day, anything that you're using it for that's kind of interesting or creative, or maybe is there a way that you prompt or you approach it?
I see it through a product lens. So, I'm always thinking about how can we build this into our products.
Mm,
I I I was a subscriber to these things, and I tried to use it in my writing, and I hated what it did to my writing. It gave me some good ideas,
yeah.
but I just wrote a book, and I'm an AI guy, and I'm like, and no AI other than like spell checkers, got used in the writing of this book because it's I wrote it, right?
Yeah.
And now the AI is going to get trained on what I wrote. Okay, oh well, but that's okay. I'm willing to make that contribution. So I don't, I'm still trying out these more advanced things. I actually want to use it to help me do satiric songs. That's my main application, right? It's like because I enjoy doing that, and songwriting doesn't come naturally to me. That's
Yeah.
something the AI actually helps me with. But my normal writing, I'm like, no, that's me. Spell check me, but stop there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, good for you, right? Keeping it wholesome.
Yeah.
What about using AI for social good and nonprofits? And how are you looking at this?
I did something called the nonprofit AI treasure map last year, and it's aimed at nonprofit leaders because every nonprofit leader is asking me and any other tech person they've ever run into, what should they be doing with AI? Because all of society is struggling with this, as you know well, right? And so my biggest point to them was wait for a product. You know, when you can buy a commercial product, whether it's Copilot or Claude or or whatever, or Gemini or whatever it might be, um, you can then test it. It's going to make mistakes. It's going to do things wrong. If you get more productivity out of it than it costs you to fix the mistakes, it's a win. And people are finding this in grant writing, especially writing boring stuff like, government grant applications, you know, software development. These are all things that the AI tool is really helpful. What I'm trying to stop little nonprofits from doing is thinking they have to go off and build a product. They should not be trying to create their own AI product right now any more than a golf course or a barber shop that should be writing its own software. And I know vibe coding is really popular, but I think vibe coding is great for prototyping. I think it's terrible to bet your business on a piece of vibe coded software. Just don't think it's good enough. And if you don't have any tech skills, you can't debug it. So, you know, vibe coding can be good for a hack, can be a shortcut, can a productivity gain, but I wouldn't bet my core business processes or my core nonprofit processes on a piece of code that I prompted into existence.
Hmm. Any particular tools that you recommend that people use or check out that kind of get your seal of approval?
Oh, I think that, more and more nonprofit leaders just need to generically use AI just in their, grant applications. Every nonprofit leader has to write grant applications. It's a great application for the current technology tools. Just fact check the output, right?
Hmm.
Make sure it doesn't commit you to something like 10 times more than you can actually do for a given amount of money. Those errors are happening less and less. But I just think that getting used to it, but the number one advice I actually tell people is start earlier. Get good with data. Because if you're an organization that makes decisions based on data, if you're actually keeping track of things, if you know what it costs you to acquire either a customer or a client as a charity, I mean, the reason the business field, the business sector is getting so good with AI is because they got good with data first. Data is table stakes in the AI wars, right? If you don't have any data, what do you got, right? Especially in your area. So I just tell them, don't throw away your data, keep your data, get better at data, know what good looks like and not so good. And then when it comes time to apply an AI product, you'll have a frame of mind to actually evaluate, did this save us more time than it cost us?
What about on the business side? Any favorite tools over there that you recommend?
You know, I mean, on the business side, I'm recommending sort of the standard off the shelf stuff. I
Mhm.
tell nonprofits, you should be using QuickBooks. I mean,
Mhm.
it's not designed for nonprofits, but it's so much easier to use QuickBooks and it's cheap and everybody knows how to use QuickBooks, and it's the same thing, you don't need a word processor for human rights, right? So the standard productivity suites that everyone else is using, you should be using that. Anything that has to do with admin and operations and finance, you probably should be using the same tools that you'd be using if you were a small or medium-sized business. And so I just recommend the same ones that everyone else does. It's when you're doing something that's you're in mental health and you're delivering mental health services, then that's where you need something that's specific to your
Mhm.
domain, to your vertical, if
Yeah,
you're a for-profit. And
yeah.
so, and that's the more challenging, and that's also the riskier thing, right? Because now you're not talking about using an AI tool to make yourself more productive. You're talking about inflicting AI on poor people or people in crisis. The bar is higher.
Yeah.
You have to be ethical about that. You have to make sure that you're doing no harm before you do it. And I don't know, one of the horrible examples we had, someone bought the marketing thing, fired all the counseling staff of the National Eating Disorders Association, put a chatbot on the line, and 3 days later, the chatbot was caught telling people to count calories, which is like the last thing you ever do with someone who has an eating disorder. And they had to shut that down. So, again, you don't leap into it without knowing what you're doing. But
Yes. Yes.
someday AI should be great for people with eating disorders, but it's going to be based on actually knowing something about eating disorders and what the right things to say are and the right programs to get people and what to coach people through. If you can do it right, but not if you don't know what you're doing.
What should young adults, young people that are maybe in school right now, who are looking out at an unknown future, what should they be thinking for their education?
I divide it into the technical and the soft, or the hard and the soft skills. Right now, the tech education's going into you're going to be in an AI powered world. Get good with the AI job. You're not going to lose your job to an AI as much as you're going to lose your job to someone who uses AI more effectively than you. And I'm not the first person who's ever said that. That's kind of the standard advice.
Hmm.
But the other thing is that I think the soft skills, working on a team, being able to communicate ideas clearly, these are all things that are indispensable in whatever field you're going to go into. And so, I mean, I went to Caltech, but I'm much more happy with my ability to write and communicate for my job as the head of a nonprofit than I am on my ability to do, linear algebra. Even if so much of AI is based on linear algebra, I don't really use it day to day.
Yeah. 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 What about the next level? What about parents who have children, right? How should they be thinking in terms of raising their youngin?
I mean, the hardest thing is to actually tune in, right? What the average parent, it's almost like the average parent knows about as much as what their kids are using technology for as the average CEO knows what their employees are using AI right now to do, right? There's this giant disconnect from the people, especially the younger generation, and their use of the tools. So when I tell parents, it's like, tune in. Do not use the digital pacifier. Your 4-year-old doesn't need to be as good on a tablet or an iPhone as you are. And yet it's seductive. And of course, as a tech person, I admire the people who actually keep their young kids on a tech diet, who actually learn how to play with other kids. And so, and I don't know, it's kind of a throwback view, but I mean, just as I believe in the power of AI for productivity gains, it's not clear when it comes to children that productivity gains is what we're looking for. I think we're looking for nicer, more effective kids. And that involves more human and soft skills than it
Yeah.
does hard skills. Even though, yes, I want them to be able to read and write, but the human part's as or more important.
If you had to leave everyone with kind of one core thought or message or affirmation to take with them into the future to use technology for good or create a world where technology is used for good, what would it be?
The number one thing is when you think of a great idea that can help society and then you figure out it doesn't make a lot of money, don't shelve it then.
Mm,
It needs to be done. 90% of humanity, the planet, they're the people who most need the benefits of technology and are least able to afford it. And so, whether you control technology, be open to licensing it for markets that you'll never go after. If you have a great idea and you don't care about becoming a billionaire, maybe starting a nonprofit is the right answer for you. Or getting it done. I want to see technology benefit all of humanity, not just the richest few percent.
mm. All right, one last question.
Yeah.
Do you think that AI ever wakes up or becomes sentient or self-aware or is indistinguishable? It's behaving as if it is. And if that happens, then what?
The problem with anything technological, if you say ever, you're in deep yogurt. So if you say, do I think we're going to have self-aware AI in 10 years? No. I'm definitely in the AI is normal technology. It is not the Godstone that has come out. So, and yeah, and again, the AI is normal technology. That's a paper from the AI snake oil guys. So I'm a believer that it's just another piece of technology. The question is, can we have AI that is indistinguishable from something that seems to be sentient? 10 to 30 years starts getting kind of realistic, but I hope that we continue to have our finger on this is a tool, this is not a new species, and we're going to be symbiotes like we are now. I
Hmm.
mean, human plus smartphone, pretty powerful cyborg.
Yeah. Yeah. Jim, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation. We'll put some links to your work and your book down below. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot for being interested in Tech for Good, Evan.